Hey everybody, it's me, Buster Green. I'm back today from my depressing trip to the Appalachian Wasteland to check on the state of the Deep South, and it was pretty bad. I'll do a video on anything I learned about that later. I'm also considering doing a dropship insane video about Zootopia 2. That might be too insane, but Zootopia 2 was definitely more than I expected, and I'm not sure if I can even mentally comprehend to deal with all that. Anyway, I'm back covering Super Sentai news. We've been covering the Maya Imamori situation and the end of Super Sentai itself. And sorry about the low quality video last week. I did it on my car, but I'm back in the studio today. And I'm glad I got that video done because there's even more crazy news going on this week. So let's get into it. All right, first things first is Gojuger 40 aired this week in Japan. Last week, the show was just a preview. Last week it was 39, a clip show. This week, we finally got into our first full episode with Kohaku Sumino, and we got a full explanation of why she looks like Kohaku now, and it was pretty self-aware. The explanation was that somehow the Tega sword changed her face because she was wearing a disguise, and now it changed her face and her entire personality. I guess there's some funny jokes about that, but you know, that's what's going on, and you kind of all know what's really going on, right? So unless you're a little kid, then yeah, she just accidentally changed her face forever, and that's what we're going to be led to believe. There were also a number of people very completely impressed that they reshot the entire opening sequence yet again to include Kohaku in place of Maya, which is pretty freaking crazy that they managed to do that so fast. It syncs perfectly with the old shots. It's a great replacement. Now, anyway, beyond that, there are 9 episodes of Super Sentai less before it goes off the air forever, but there might be even less than 9 because we might have lost some episodes due to the Maya Imamori scandal. I don't have confirmation that we have lost episodes, but Galvan Infinity is now scheduled to air in Super Sentai's time slot in January. That means potentially there's up to 5 cut episodes that are now lost media due to changes in production and due to Maya Imamori being ripped out of the show. I'm watching like a hawk to see how many episodes of Gojuger we end up with at the final count, since it was reported to have 50 episodes before the whole Maya Gate tragedy went down. Now, after that, moving on, Project Red news. We got, I want to say 3 previews for Space Sheriff Galvan Infinity, but like the first 2 were teaser previews where like they were really low quality and they were very abstract and they basically showed nothing. First, there was a preview teaser that just showed the Project Red logo interspliced over some random footage of people in Tokyo. That was completely nothing. Then there was a second preview teaser that had even more useless nonsense. It just showed some vintage Space Sheriff Galvan attack information and animations in the void of outer space. Then finally, there was this third, significantly more interesting trailer where they did the first face reveal for Galvan Infinity. And it revealed that, guess what? He actually looks like Galvan, confirming the deepfake AI propaganda I showed last week where he looked like Kamen Rider was a complete fake. I'm super relieved he has the visor like Galvan. I'm relieved my expectations for this to be a real Galvan reboot are seemingly working out. I want to bring up that like about 10 years ago, they did reboots of Space Sheriff Galvan, Sharavan, and Shider, and Kikaider, and those reboots didn't really work out. But I want to say that the main reason they didn't work out was because they were one-shot, low-budget movies. Like, I do feel that, like, now that we're going into Project Red and Galvan Infinity, this has major chances of completely outdoing those movies because, like, Galvan G showed up in, like, a handful of crossovers, but the problem was that all of those movies were just one-and-done stories. And for Tokusatsu to really succeed, it has to be on for like the whole year. It has to get like the 50 episodes and all that. So I don't feel like those reboot movies were real reboots because they didn't go anywhere. Galvan Infinity is the real reboot we've been waiting for because it will actually be a full show. And also, that also reminds me that I want to lay down a fact that right now, Universe Heroes / Project Red, TV Asahi has given them a 5-year greenlight / 5-year plan, meaning that there will be 5 interconnected, maybe not so interconnected, loosely related shows in this series. Now, I'm not sure exactly what the full plan is here because so far we only really know that Galvan Infinity will be the next year's show. But if I had to take some wild guesses, I'm hoping that they'll do the whole Galvan trilogy. I'm hoping we'll get Shider and Sharavan remakes next. And then the last 2 years, I expect they'd just be something random and unexpected. But I would like maybe a remake of Spielbahn and Just if we're just pulling out remakes. But I do think a majority of these shows are going to be completely new beyond Galvan Infinity. I think we could get up to 4 new shows in this Universe Heroes franchise. So yeah, let's see what happens next. Maybe the next show will be an unexpected show, or maybe it'll be Charavan Infinity. Who the hell knows? Just sit back and see what happens. Now, lastly, there's also some further news about Galvan Infinity that it will have Power Rangers style Zords, and that since the original Galvan had like a space dragon called Goldiran, these new Infinite Galvans will have like 5 different dragon-like Zords that will fight each other. It also seemingly implies from this new leak that although it will have 5 heroes like the Power Rangers, they might not all be on the same team or faction, and there might be either like some competition or like some evil like heroes or something like that. All right, anyway, so that's all the updates on Galvan Infinity. But the reason we're talking about Galvan Infinity is because Super Sentai is ending and being replaced by that. So now for the rest of this video, I'm going to go over more of what's going on with Super Sentai ending. And this week, as Super Sentai is winding down, this week in particular, there was a lot of finger pointing going on. Now, after Gojuger 40 aired, we got a couple of different articles coming out from various media sources in Japan, and they're all blaming various different entities for why Super Sentai is over. And the scandalous headline this week is that Hasbro killed the Power Rangers and that Super Sentai slowly died out with it. What?
この番組はよらんのスポンサーの提供でお送りします。
All right, so yeah, that's what rocked the world this week. Let's check this one out. The first article I wanted to go over. All right, so the 50-year-long Super Sentai series is coming to an end. The truth behind the one loser in toy sales that divided Kamen Rider and Ultraman. That's a funny way of saying what we're going to get into. But yeah, so this is a new article today from Live Door News. It's really interesting. They're, for whatever reason, interviewing Kiyofumi Tane. According to my sources, Kiyofumi Tane was one of the writers on Gundam Seed, and he most recently wrote the Gundam 0083 recompilation manga. I'm not sure if he's written for Sentai. I'm not sure why they're talking to him. But anyway, so here's what happens in this article. So first things first, they mentioned that Gojuger is honestly doing very bad ratings-wise. Gojuger apparently only has 2% of the Japanese population watching it, which I'm not sure what the normal numbers are, but apparently that is super low compared to past Sentai. Then after that, Live Door gets into this long blame game of who killed Super Sentai, who's the murderer, who's the guilty party, and so they basically blame like 4 different entities. Now, the first culprit Live Door blames for Super Sentai failing is that people just aren't making babies like they used to. The first thing the article blames is that the declining Japanese birth rate has removed children from just like everyday reality in Japan. And at this point in 2025, it's at like a crazy level because there are less kids in society. There are less businesses and services catering to kids in Japan, which unfortunately is also driving up the overall prices for kid products because there's not enough kids to buy the products. Now, that is just super depressing, and that's still an ongoing problem in Japan. I hope Japan can eventually work that out and get back to making love. Anyway, second culprit that they blame is the villain of Toy Story 5, the tablet computer. Because apparently kids these days are not wanting toys either, and I guess neither are the parents. They're just opting to plop their kids in front of these crappy iPad tablets and give them free shovelware games, which are mostly just feeding them into commercials for better, more expensive games. And yeah, that's all ironic because they're feeding these babies like a constant stream of like tablet garbage, YouTube slop, all this low quality content coming from these like content farms that's just bullshit created to exploit the algorithm for profit. I think that should probably be illegal, especially giving it to kids, but that's basically like the capitalism matrix that everyone's trapped in right now. And so, yeah, as usual, evil people are making money exploiting children, and the world is a worse place for it at the end of the day. Now, the third culprit here, the real bombshell of the article, the one that everyone is looking at and saying, oh, hell yeah. The one loser in toy sales that divided Kamen Rider, Ultraman, and Super Sentai, it's apparently Hasbro. So the big crazy revelation in this article is that this guy is directly blaming Hasbro for killing Super Sentai and saying that Hasbro made a malicious business deal with Super Sentai, which ultimately ended up killing it. So then they basically go back in time and explain that back in the day when Power Rangers was like first coming up, when Saban created the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, the only reason that Japan even allowed that original Power Rangers deal to go through was basically Saban was allowed to edit the show to his heart's content, add whatever wacky subplots he created. But at the end of the day, Bandai Japan still had the full toy rights for the original Power Rangers brand. And so that's why even when the show got farther and farther away from the original Super Sentai plots, they would always bring it back to the original Zords or the original monsters, because that's how Japan would make their money. The Japanese version, Bandai Japan, would always monetize Super Sentai and the Power Rangers by selling those toys, selling those Zords, selling those monsters. But this article details that what happened here is that when Hasbro acquired the Power Rangers in 2018, somehow they were so aggressive that they managed to cancel out Bandai Japan's toy manufacturing contract. And this essentially killed the golden goose that kept the entire money-making machine running. Because not only did Hasbro eventually completely stop making Power Rangers content because they got bored with it, but Bandai got completely fucked on this deal. They lost out massively because according to these factoids here, in 2017, before the deal went through, Super Sentai toys were selling 8 billion yen in sales in Japan. But at the same time, globally, Power Rangers toys made by the same Bandai factory in Shizuoka, they were bringing in 21 billion yen, more than twice the same amount of money, which is apparently what allowed for all these Super Sentai shows to be created in the first place. The toys played for the show, then the show made more toys. The Super Sentai production line was disrupted by Hasbro, and that's why the show is dead now. Now, apparently the Power Ranger sales were so great that it was the only thing allowing Super Sentai to keep up financially with Ultraman and Kamen Rider. But yeah, Hasbro somehow took that away from them, and Bandai instantly lost over 2/3 of the financial system that was keeping Super Sentai afloat. In the words of these people talking in Japan, this was an absolutely fatal event. Now, ironically, they then point out that meanwhile, Ultraman and Kamen Rider have just gotten stronger since 2017, with both of them doing successful international pushes backed by the Shin Japan Heroes Cinematic Universe. Ultraman has apparently gone full mainstream in China, and Kamen Rider is doing really great with Kamen Rider Zets airing in America lately. Did you guys watch Zets today? I actually haven't watched it yet. I'm behind, but I'm going to watch it tonight. Nitwit says, holy smokes, Hasbro has too much power. Yeah, I'm not sure how they got Japan to agree to such a bad deal with Hasbro. I'm not sure if they caught them in a moment of weakness or whatever, but that Hasbro deal does seem to have directly destroyed fundamental structure of how Super Sentai gets made, which is why it's ending now. Anyway, that being said, the last thing this article finally points the finger at is adults, randomly blaming not just kids for not buying enough toys, but adults too. It points out that somehow Kamen Rider has stayed in business because it has a healthy adult fan base that still buys Kamen Rider toys no matter how old they are, and adults watch Kamen Rider and they kind of project themselves onto the adult characters, which is actually literally the premise of the anime Tojima Wants to Be Kamen Rider. But on the other hand, somehow Sentai is not succeeding at that. Despite also having a team of adult heroes, it's seemingly blaming that Sentai is not succeeding due to its childish tone. Then they point out a specific example here, Q Ranger. Q Ranger had 9 different heroes, and it points out that that was a particular failure because it had too large a cast, making the toys too difficult to collect, making there too many characters to follow. Its diverse cast didn't have enough of an impact to reach full popularity. And then it points out with the Kamen Rider toy line, you just got one guy, you got several high-end products. And then it mentions all these high-end Kamen Rider toys made for adults, which is why you have those like super cool but super expensive screen accurate Kamen Rider belts that cost like $300 to $500. Then the article finally addresses that there's this like craving that there needs to be like a grittier Sentai series for adults, and it's hoping that that's going to be Project Red. It seems to imply that Project Red will be a grittier series. It brings up Jetman and how Jetman succeeded by using adult elements. And then it also mentions on the flip side in the 70s, Jacker kind of failed for having them. But I think like the tastes have changed and like the time is right. And it seems that they're very hopeful that Gavan Infinity will have that original manly quality that the original Gavan was famous for and succeeded with. Anyway, that's not the only thing to go over. Then there's this other article. So this article was really difficult to get a hold of. This is from Asahi Shimbun. This is a premium article that someone had to pay for. So anyway, in this article, they directly talk to TV Asahi and they directly interview a Toei executive about Super Sentai ending. Now, this is a paid article, so you probably won't be able to access it, but I really wanted to check this out, so I found a friend in Japan and they shared with me their paid copy, so I was able to read this one part. So anyway, in this article, they interview Shinichiro Shirakura, a 60-year-old senior executive at Toei, and he drops a bunch of bombshells here. Now, as we've been very much trying to come to terms with Super Sentai ending, Shirakura thinks that they will reboot Super Sentai, but unfortunately he expects no such reboot until at least after the year 2035, over 10 years in the future. So get ready to be fucking old because that's when Super Sentai is coming back. Now after that, Shirakura gets into these 2 black ships that destroyed Super Sentai. Now, this is a really, really convoluted reference to the way Commodore Perry invaded Japan in the 1800s and like kind of destroyed samurai culture by arriving with guns and Christianity and smallpox and all that. And what he means by this is that in this case, when he says a black ship, he means a foreign, complicated concept that instantly destroys Japan just by existing. So yeah, going back to the smallpox, the first black ship he mentions is the pandemic, or rather the fact that before the pandemic, streaming never took off in Japan at the level it did in the US. Until the pandemic, until everyone was trapped at home, until everyone was bored. That was finally like the clincher that finally made streaming take off in Japan. Now, apparently, somehow this completely messed up tokusatsu, because according to him, somehow ironically, all these classic shows suddenly being available on streaming has directly hurt the release of new tokusatsu and especially the release of new modern Super Sentai. Now, I do somewhat have to blame this on the fact that in Japan, the prices of DVDs and Blu-rays are absolutely insane. 6 episodes of Gojuger, 1/4 of the show, costs like $200 USD on average, which means you're paying like $30 an episode for like a 24-minute episode. And this is meanwhile, at the same time, the average streaming service in Japan still will cost you $10 to $20 a month for infinite entertainment. So yeah, it's insane why anyone would buy 6 episodes of Gojuger for $200, where for like $10 you can hop on Netflix and see the entirety of like Ultraman Jack streaming for free. Ultraman Jack is a great damn show. But so anyway, then the Toei exec gets into the fact that Super Sentai, now all out of nowhere, since streaming has to compete with older Super Sentai shows, I think that's why Gojuger had callbacks. It's also the reason why more recent Super Sentai shows have gotten more weirder and more abstract as a result, because they suddenly realized that they had to stand out compared to their predecessors, or everyone would just watch the reruns from back in their day. It specifically mentions that this philosophy was directly applied to Zenkaiger, and that's why 4 of the members were robots, because that had never been done before. The other interesting black ship that Toei talks about is the goddamn Avengers, the MCU, the Marvel Cinematic Universe. It's the Avengers again. The Avengers really did change everything. So he points out that when the Avengers launched in Japan, it like blew everyone's brains because they had never like seen an interconnected universe done that well before, and it really changed the thoughts that audiences and film studios had about doing interconnected universes. And then in comparison, Super Sentai's structure of just rebooting everything every year started to look kind of antiquated. It almost seems like this Toei executive is kind of jealous that the MCU pulled off a continuous story so well, and he kind of wanted to apply that structure to Sentai, almost like the way Power Rangers did the first 6 years, you know? Now, what's interesting, though, is that when he gets the same question from the last article about if he is to blame adults for the collapse of Super Sentai, this guy completely disagrees with that question. This guy says that that's not the case. In his view, Super Sentai is fun because it is childlike, because it is absurd, because it's goofy, because monsters explode. He thinks if you made a grim, gritty Sentai series, he doesn't think that would be the right way to go because people just like seeing, you know, people jumping around in spandex, blowing up monsters and a giant robot and all that. I guess I'm reminded of Adi Shakur's bootleg Power Rangers movie where they were all child soldiers on drugs. Also, real quick at Zachman. Zachman's asking if I think Shin's Super Sentai will ever happen. I really want it to happen. I'm really hopeful it will happen. It does seem that like the first article is influencing it will happen, but this guy here seems like he's more against the idea. Anyway, then he just starts to get into the past. He talks about the weird comfort factor, the fact that you can watch any episode of Sentai from any year, and it's pretty much fundamentally the same show, like from the 70s to the 90s to now. He does take a step back and wonder if the framework and the commonality of it all is a benefit or a hindrance. And then he talks about how in Jetman and Zoo Ranger in like the early 90s, Sentai was about to end back then, but somehow the Power Rangers came around and completely turned the situation around. Then he goes on to mention the full source of the Super Sentai series, that Super Sentai actually started as a spin-off of Kamen Rider X. Apparently the plan after Kamen Rider X was to create a show using all 5 of the first Kamen Riders together to make their own like next season of Kamen Rider, but they weren't able to get all the original actors to come back, and that plan fell apart. So ultimately, Ishinomori came up with the Go Rangers as an idea to create 5 new cyborg heroes. Although ultimately at the same time, Taiwan made their own bootleg 5-rider movie, and that's kind of crazy. Anyway, so these original Go Rangers as riders concept was briefly referenced in a conceptual team called the Go Riders that showed up in the middle of Kamen Rider X-Aid about 10 years ago. And then he claims that the reason all Super Sentai series have robots is that they were just blatantly stolen from the classic robot anime, Chodenji Robo Combattler V. Now, after that, there's a little more information from the Toei executive about Project Red and what his goals are for that show. But unfortunately, I can't read the rest of that because that's stuck behind the paywall. So I guess I'm going to have to figure that out later. But I get the gist that they are trying to target a broader international and adult audience from just the vibes and like the first couple of sentences. All right, so that's everything that happened this week. I'll release some videos later this week to go over where I've been this week, last week, and maybe I'll review Zootopia 2. All right, I'm going to wrap up the video now, but let's see what's going on in the comments. Hey, everyone, how you doing? Zachman says, Cosmic Fury and the Ninja Kids AI fiasco. Japan was probably in the right for blaming Hasbro. It's been a long time since Cosmic Fury. I do want to double check the Ninja Kids AI fiasco. I sort of know what happened there, but I don't have a full understanding of that yet. That kind of went by me, but I was aware it happened. Zachman says, one thing I'm hoping eventually will happen will be a Kamen Rider Zets team up with all the Showa riders. That would be cool. I would also really love to see a Zets Kamen Rider W crossover because I feel like they've got similar vibes. I'm assuming most likely we'll just get a Zets crossover with the last Kamen Rider series. Maybe they'll do a Zets Gav crossover. But yeah, I'd much rather see Zets crossover with a Kamen Rider that was like more tonally similar. That's why I mentioned W. Nitwit says, do you think Super Sentai could come back? I think I definitely agree with the Toei executive that Super Sentai probably won't come back until after 2035. Like, it makes sense to bring it back after 2035. I think there'd be a demand by them. And I think the main reason they're waiting for 2035s is I'm pretty sure it being off the air for 10 years will cancel out Hasbro's contract. I really think Super Sentai is leaving for like some legal like war games here. I don't think it's anything really that particular. I think the fact they're blaming Hasbro now all out is that it goes to show that Hasbro has made the situation no longer profitable. And I think they're straight up pulling the show for 10 years and replacing it with Gavon so they can like just time out the contract. Because I'm almost certain that there's probably a rule in the contract that if Super Sentai is canceled for 10 years, they'll get the toy rights back. So I'm pretty sure that's what they're waiting for. Hyper Turbo Fox says at least Sentai ended with cool suits. Yeah, I'm liking Gojuger. I've actually started to watch it a little bit to cover it for this like news series, and I really do like feel like that something has been lost between like the Mayagate scandal and Sentai ending in general. So I'm going to be sad to see these guys go. Thank you. I'll see you guys later.